The crisis in Sri Lanka is there for all to see. What started off as an acute economic crisis has now translated into a political crisis and therefore a social crisis as well. As a responsible media organization, Newsfirst has always sought to seek solutions to these crises while keeping you updated on what happens around the country and across the globe. So today we have started this brand new segment called Newsfirst Focal Point that we will use as a method to seek solutions to the current crises and the complications our country faces. I am Jayamal Ratnayake for the Newsfirst team, and today we are joined by none other than Dhananath Fernando. He is the Chief Operating Officer of Advocata Institute. A very good day to you, Dhananath. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and joining us.
Thank you, Jayamal. Thank you for having me.
Dhananath, I want to draw your attention to the matters at hand straight away. We know that there are fuel queues, we know that there are people protesting, there's mass indignation against the current regime and the maladministration of the government. Let's talk about 2019, when the president came into power, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa came into power, and his government decided to slash taxes, more specifically VAT and NBT, that is Nation Building Tax and Value Added Tax. They reduced VAT from 15% to 8%, and NBT, they slashed it completely, they abolished it from 2%. But soon after, COVID-19 came to pass, and that was seen as something that was unexpected. But the government still hasn't managed to reinstate those taxes and find some source of funding. Why do you think the government failed to do so, Dharana?
The problem, Jayamal, in terms of taxes, when they slashed those taxes, they didn't expect a tax cut in the a COVID pandemic in the first place. Second, we didn't have a strategy to cover that revenue loss by cutting down any expenditure. So as a result, our expenditure also ballooned, and we had a massive tax gap which is amounted to about 500 billion to 600 billion every year. So my view is it was a very short-sighted measure. Because increasing taxes is not going to be very popular, and that has been done when they took over power. Their rationale provided at that time was to stimulate the economy, because the growth was at about 2%, 2.3%, so they wanted to stimulate the economy by a massive tax cut. But ideally the stimulation could have done through a massive deregulation measure rather than a tax cut, because already we had a massive budget deficit. And my view is it was short-sighted and it was the wrong strategy, wrong tool used is what happened. I don't have any other explanation why they did it, but now the problem has complicated. Now imagine people are in fuel lines, gas lines, and when you go back and say, okay, increase taxes, that's not going to reflect well, because they are already suffering. They even don't have essentials, and you go back and say, let's increase the taxes. Of course, we have to increase the taxes, unfortunately, whether we like it or not. But now the resistance would be much higher to do that, and especially the businesses are having a very bad time because of electricity issue. So when you go and say, look, I'm going to increase the taxes, especially the direct taxes, the corporate taxes, the individual taxes to a higher percentage, that would be very difficult. But I think we really don't have any other solution to this.
So before we move on, I want to ask Dhananath about the solution for this. What is the solution when it comes to the tax regime in Sri Lanka?
Jamal, the solution has to start, of course we have to increase the taxes, but it's not literally the tax to GDP ratio. Of course we are one of the lowest in the world. We have, I think, about 8 to 9%, at least we have to increase it to about 14-15%. But we collect taxes, or we collect money to build public goods and to save for the safety of our most vulnerable community. But if the tax money is leaking from some other unnecessary projects and through some other unnecessary state-owned enterprises, there is no point having a big like tax to GDP ratio if your money is already leaking through state-owned enterprises. So the best example is, there's a big discussion on Sri Lankan Airlines. They are going to lease out more aeroplanes while people are suffering at streets, and our electricity board, petroleum corporation, they are making colossal losses. So I think the the solution starts from reforming the state-owned enterprises while you increase the taxes. So then you build confidence that we are serious about saving money and spending it on right channels. Now the money collected are spent on completely unnecessary projects and state-owned enterprises. Now we have to stop that leakage and then invest that money to save our most vulnerable people, because our poverty level probably have increased by threefold in my view. It was about 4.1% earlier according to the available information, but now with this current situation with the rupee depreciation, it must have increased by threefold. So we have to save that money, tax money, and invest in right channels. At the same time, we have to at least increase the tax base, starting from, because now the VAT limit is about 300 million, and I think we have to bring it down, increase the tax base, and also somewhat increase taxes like VAT, which can be easily done rather than targeting direct taxes at the beginning. And we have to slowly phase out and do the tax revision, but it would be challenging in my view given the current circumstances.
Dhananath, let's focus now on foreign reserves. It is vital for a country to have good foreign reserves to run its daily operations. We have an import bill, especially a country like Sri Lanka, where we don't produce much, we import many items, and foreign reserves are vital to an economy like us. But with COVID-19, foreign reserves that were at around 7 billion rupees, 7 billion US dollars in November 2019 dwindled to about 1.5 billion US dollars at the end of 2021. While regional peers bolstered their foreign reserves like Bangladesh, even amidst COVID-19. Why did Sri Lanka fail to do so, and how can we uplift our foreign reserves once more?
Jamal, the logic of foreign reserves is like what you save for a rainy day or a bad day, right? It's not to import, also it is not to service our debts. So basically you are servicing your debt by the revenue that you generate from the borrowed money that you have invested on some asset, and what is generated from that asset you should be able to settle your debtors and the debt servicing. And for imports, basically you should be able to cover it from your exports and other foreign income like the remittances and tourism, so on and so forth. But what happened for us was we didn't invest our borrowed money in revenue generating assets. It was completely a waste, and even ideally it should have generated dollar revenue, but even we couldn't make it to generate a rupee revenue. So there is no way that we could service the debt. That's the first part. Second part was, because of we didn't invest the money properly, we were cut down from further borrowing. So then we couldn't borrow even to settle our previous creditors.
We were locked out from debt market.
We were completely locked out from debt market. So now there was only one way to pay our debtors or to pay our creditors. That is to use our reserves. And reserves are not used for that. Of course, reserves are used for that. You have to build the reserves to pay it, because you are paying it ultimately from reserves, but you should be able to build the reserves to pay it. But now we are not building the reserves, we can't borrow,
But depleting them.
we are depleting them. And then that's what happened. And then some other reserves we use for importing essential food items. So basically reserves completely we are at almost zero or at negative levels. While the other countries, they managed to increase their revenue, so they build their reserves, while we fail to do so. So my view is the solution is now first at least we have to get the access back from the credit financial markets. But again, unfortunately or fortunately, the only way to come out of is also we have to take more loans, because there is otherwise there's no way that we can come out, because if we try to create a revenue and build it, our economy will further die, because economy is not like, it's a very complex system. So the solution is we have to first do the reforms, because only reforms will make sure that we will get the credit market access, because our creditors are already worried that we have already we have announced that we have suspended our debt servicing, so they want to first take their money back. So for them to take their money back, it's important that we do well. To do well, there is no other way. You have to do the reforms and make sure that we make the economy dynamic. So I would say the solution is start with the reforms, then you can actually build the reserves, but of course the reserves building would be done through borrowing more money. But when we borrow more money, we have to make sure that the economy is productive and competitive, that we can outpace the loans that we are taking by the economic growth in a longer run. That's the only way out, as I see, Jayamal.
Speaking about reforms, Sri Lanka's only hope to resuscitate its economy seems to be like entering into negotiations with the IMF, and now we have information that Sri Lanka will initiate discussions with the International Monetary Fund on the 18th of April. Dhananath, can you tell me, there are a lot of words being thrown around, staff level agreements and IMF imposing their own terms and conditions, because the IMF will not hand out money free of charge. They will want some sort of accountability for that. What sort of scheme do you think will best fit Sri Lanka, and how can Sri Lanka benefit from this, and how does an IMF scheme usually work?
So Jayamal, IMF is like the last lender.
It's the last resort.
It's the last resort, and we have been to IMF 16 times. As if I recall right, only 6 programs have been completed out of 16. So 10 we haven't completed. And IMF has different programs. Basically, I think we have to go for a program called Extended Fund Facility. So Extended Fund Facility is they give the support in tranches, but with a commitment to do reforms, and it's basically more than 36 months. I think we have taken about 4 extended fund facilities. But nothing after, if I recall right, after 2000 we haven't taken any extended fund facility. So the challenge is when we go to the IMF, of course there will be some conditions that we have to adhere, but this time it would be very unique in my view, because the Sri Lankan government, also IMF don't like give you like a list saying, look, you have to implement this and you have to do this and we will give money. It's not like a transaction. Both the countries together will develop a program, and this time most likely the creditors will also have some say, because as I mentioned earlier, they also have to recover the money, because when we are restructuring the debt, the program has to make sure that we do well even after 5-6 years, that they can at least get back the money. Otherwise we will default again and again on the same bond or the same debt that we have taken. So basically what we have to do is we have to develop a program going beyond the IMF scope, because we know what reforms that we need to do. That's what exactly India did in 1991. IMF can be satisfied easily, Jayamal. You have to give something in the sense, you have to have a basic reform plan, and then they will give money. And when IMF comes in, the good thing is the other lenders will also come and they can support, because there is an assurance that the money that we will get from other lenders will not be paid for our creditors. So then they know this support is generously for people, but for the welfare of the people, because they know the suffering. But the problem is, if we don't go with a proper reform plan, and if we don't do like a fully comprehensive reform, making this as an opportunity, just if we were to try to satisfy IMF some of their guidelines, and if we try to get some money and try to, you call like, bring a solution temporary, we will be back on the same problem with a bigger depth in 3 to 5 years time again, because that has been, when you default once, generally those countries tend to default more than once thereafter. So my view is you have to go with a comprehensive reform plan, front loading the critical reforms, because you have to get the serious reforms done early, and whatever which is possible easily can be done, let's do it even before going to IMF. We are already starting the discussion on 18, so let's do it beforehand and then do the comprehensive reforms. That's my view, but it has to be, we have to go for the full package, not like just going and negotiating some
bailout.
Exactly, not the bailout. That's what India did. That's what Manmohan Singh and Montek Singh Ahluwalia did in 1991. IMF, they were agreeable to like very few conditions, but they went for a full package and they completely restructured the economy. Our main challenge, and IMF will mainly base their reforms on the recently produced IMF Article 4 report. So they have given about 5 main recommendations, including targeting on the most vulnerable sections in the society. So probably they will base their recommendations on that report. So definitely the tax increase is going to come and expenditure cuts will come, but we have to go beyond on changing our legislature. There's a lot of things to change on our custom regulation, on our Paddy Land Act, on our land regulation, on our public transportation, things like that, because that will bring down the fuel cost, and overall other reforms will work in a way to increase the productivity and the efficiency of our economy. And that's where we have to go. I don't think we should just go to IMF and get $3-4 billion and just go for a bailout. We have to have a genuine interest on completely restructuring our economy, because Jamal, we are at the rock bottom. There's nothing, there's nowhere else that we can go. Already we are experiencing medical and pharmaceutical shortages, there's fuel rationing happening, and there's no electricity. Everything is happening, and we have to expect there will be more geopolitical and natural disasters will come in the next coming years, because that's how the world is. So we have to go for the full package and basically rebuild our entire economy and have that proper foundation. But that foundation will only come through based on competition, based on markets, securing the property rights of people, and those have to be in the forefront of the reform plan as the principles. And then we have to structure this reform plan properly if we are serious about overcoming this crisis in the long run.